encouraging. But how do you explain this genetic behavior that we've heard about so much today of our own kind turning against our own kind or following policies which are absolutely destructive for our own kind?
Yeah, how do I explain if genetic similarity and replication of a genes is a genetic whisper or genetic imperative? How can people behave in such a suicidal manner? I've thought about this too, and I don't have a definitive answer, but the best answer I can come up with is to look at individual psychology. I don't think this has anything to do with people today being genetically less good than they were before, or spinelessness, or anything like this. I think it's to do with the fact that we've evolved to basically follow the leader. We want to be liked, and we don't want to be disliked. We live in social groups. We're a social animal. We learn many of our social attitudes. We want to do what's good and right, and we don't really know always what's good and right. So we simply look at people who are genetically similar to ourselves, people who look like Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, Dwight Eisenhower, John Kennedy. These are the presidents, the TV anchorman, Peter Jennings. We look at these people and we say, well, that's somebody just like me, or my brother, and he's telling me such and such. And that's very, very powerful. It's very difficult for us to say to our tribal leaders, our heads of our families, the way we are genetically structuring this, that's BS, that's nonsense. And then when we also hear from all the other sources of importance that we would normally consider valuable, from the media, from the pulpit, from the school system, even from our peer group, the same story, it's very difficult to say no. And I suspect that what happens is that there are a few people who are slightly higher than average on something like autonomy or independence or clear thinkingness, perhaps. People like, obviously, me and my audience, question the received wisdom and want to think it through for ourselves. And then we come to slightly different conclusions. But for the majority of people, what is right and wrong is to some extent what their neighbors are doing. And if their neighbors are doing what they are doing, then that's the way it works. So if you have control, I mean, this can work for good or bad depending on what your politics are. I mean, if Hitler comes to power and says go to war, then the Germans, being good followers, all go to war. And if the leaders come along and say, practice democracy and let many immigrants in, then the Germans, being good followers, practice democracy and let the foreigners in. And there's nothing mysterious about it at the level of the individual psychology. It's the same process each time. And I don't think it's unique to North Europeans or to people in North America. I think the Japanese, in a way, are doing half of what we're doing. That is, they're not having any children. The average Japanese family is something like 1.3 children. China, they're having a one-child policy imposed by the government. They are, in a sense, not behaving in a simple sociobiological maximization process of having trillions of children and taking over the world with them, which would be what you would think might follow from a very simple analysis. Now, it's true that the Japanese are not allowing in many immigrants, which is a cause of concern to AR audiences. But many other countries are. The Russians are, for example. Even the Israelis are. The South Africans are. So it is not something that is specifically unique to North America or even to Europe. It is these ideas, crazy ideas even, pathological ideas almost, can and do come and go. And there's a whole literature on how you can have genetic transmission on the one hand and social transmission, cultural transmission on the other hand, and how do these two things interact and have gene-culture co-evolution. But anyway, that's the best answer I can give to that problem. Yes?
Professor Rushton, there seems to be a little bit of a problem where, on the one hand, we on the right talk about
ethnic identity or social identity that we construct for ourselves is a construction. There's no doubt about it that we can reconstruct and re-identify. I mean, there are concentric circles going outside of yourself, and what you consider to be your own nation or included in your own nation can change rapidly. And then we have to use a lot of socialization terms like brothers and sisters and the motherland and the fatherland, and in order to build this sense of kinship. And exactly who's included and who's not is to a large extent negotiable and flexible and changes. And the identity that we construct doesn't even have to be positive. I think that people were talking earlier this morning about how whites almost hate themselves as a result of internalizing things from the media. And this may be true, and anecdotally or sociologically it has been said that in earlier times Jewish identity was often self-hating because that it assimilated some of the disdain of the wider community. That black groups historically have hated themselves because they identified with the conception they have of themselves that the white slave masters or the white majority had of them. So I don't think, even though there's a genetic whisper and desire to construct an identity, the positive and negative cues and components of that identity have to be picked from the culture. And it can lead to some complexities. I'm not sure I answered your question, but let's take a question from, yes.
Do you have any idea from your research on any possible ways to trigger that ethnic identification and perhaps European Americans? I mean, imagine if all of this research you've done, is there any ideas you might have of how to trigger that reaction or to maybe bring that reaction out from your biological studies?
The question is how would one increase ethnic solidarity and ethnic nationalism, and indeed, let's say, reproduction of babies? I think the answer is quite simple, and it's not from my research, it's almost common sense. Joseph Goebbels, of course, had complete control of the media in Germany, and the German birth rate shot up, and German nationalism shot up, and ethnic solidarity increased, and out-group hatred increased. And the reason was because of the images being displayed on television. He took, if you saw today, I'm sure on television, which you will not, lots and lots of nice blue-eyed blonde babies being born, and women who had lots of these babies being happy having babies and wanting to stay at home and not to work, then you would in fact increase the number of women who would want to have babies and want to stay at home. If you showed attractive people standing up to drive the drug dealers out of their neighborhood and not care what race they were, even if they were a different race, then I think that many more people in suburban neighborhoods would rally together to drive out the alien drug dealers. And so what you see on TV, the images, the attitudes, the values that you see portrayed, especially portrayed by role models who look like you, and advertisers know this. Politicians know this. If you're running for Congress, you get workers you get black workers to go and knock on black neighborhoods. You get Hispanic voters to go and knock on Hispanic doors. You get blue-eyed blonde workers to go and knock on the suburban doors, and so on and so forth. We know that the ethnic person you're interacting with helps sell whatever the product is that you're selling, because people they trust a person who looks like their cousin more than they trust somebody who looks very, very different on average. As far as why the Palestinians are having so many children and why their people are fighting, I don't think it's got anything to do with evolutionary selection pressures quite so much as the kind of social learning and the micro society of the human individual brain. All of us live in a peer group, a small group of people that are important to us, 5 or 6, 10, 12 people at the most perhaps, our family. What they think is what's important. And somebody else earlier this morning was talking about some ethnic groups it was Dr. Gottfried was saying that some ethnic groups, blue-collar Catholics and so on, do not seem to be as susceptible to the self-destructive urges as, say, German Protestants are. I don't think there's any difference in this between Italian Catholics and German Protestants. I think what the difference is in the sense that their minds work, I think the difference is the peer groups that these particular individuals are within. Italians still live in peer groups that where being an Italian and being a Catholic, even if it's only important for the grandmother, it's still therefore important for the family. Whereas German Protestants, it's not even important for the grandparent. Yes.